All right, we are back to it. We took a little hiatus, a little Holy Week and Easter week break, but we are back to it for chapters 15 and 16. I had to double check because it's been, after a couple of weeks, I lose track of exact numbers. And
that's why I have this marker here.
right, yeah, that's why the good Lord invented bookmarks, except I'm not using one. So all right, so chapter 15, in order to bring ourselves up just a little bit, remember that after some growing success in his nefarious schemes, as of late, Wormwood seems to be losing ground. He seems to have either slipped up or just not been able to head off the godly progress of his patient as of late. And he has given some very, very lengthy self-justifying explanations to Screwtape, who obviously sees right through it. We even talked a little bit last time about when you want to justify yourself, how detailed it can become. And no, you don't understand. Let me explain it to you. And like it becomes, but if it's successful, it's like, yeah, it worked. That's when it doesn't work. It's when, but you need to understand it's because of, and you start listing all these very detailed reasons. So remember that nothing has really changed here in the sense of the overall aim of the demons. Number one, obviously, is in our suffering and corruption, they find their delight, especially when it's in an ultimate sense, when it's described as really like drinking a draught of sweet wine from our never-ending misery. But the playbook, though the details shift based off of the circumstances, seems to be pretty familiar at this point. Keep his mind off of big things. Keep him focused on little things. Keep his mind off of other people and on his own feelings. Keep those feelings foremost in his mind as being of utmost importance, because feelings will shift and change. And when they shift and change just very naturally, that will encourage him to either give up hope or to chase his feelings, which can be extremely unreliable and wherever it is they lead us.
And this one line, tortured fear and stupid confidence are both desirable states of mind.
Aha, yes. So as we now start off chapter 15, we get right into that. Yes.
Can I add something to it? So,
yes.
So real life, like real life. So give up hope or chase feelings.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Big time. Like for 40 plus years.
Sure.
Giving hope or chasing feelings. And that is part of the huge Christian experience around the world that we know of, where they chase feelings, experience, rah, rah, rah.
Right.
And then in my own personal, I give up hope and I come back.
So here we are at the beginning of 15, and that great quote happens very early on. What's the context? What's going on that elicits this comment? What about the war?
It's slacked off.
Okay, it's slacked off. There's a lull. Now, my guess, again, I'm not reading far ahead. I'm just taking what we're taking, and the details of the Second World War, which is obviously what's happening in the background, is of very minor interest to these demons. Yeah. So anytime they make reference, it's very oblique. Taking what I am guessing, I'm wondering if this is not still 1939, 1940, and what's referred to as the Phony War. If you recall, the Phony War, that was a phase of the beginning of World War II, where right after war is declared, it's really the Blitzkrieg of Poland and that invasion that prompts the declaration of war between France, England, and Nazi Germany. And then kind of nothing happens for 3 or 4 months. Everybody kind of gears up like this, we're going to get right back into it. And then there's this lull. So there's a break that now that we can look back in retrospect, it was relatively brief because it was just a few months, I guess, between the formal declaration of war and the invasion of France.
And that happened.
And once the invasion of France happens, it's on like Donkey Kong for good, and there's no slacking up pretty much ever. But rather than hot hostile engagement, England starts gearing up for war. France starts gearing up for war. We say we're in a state of war, but the Germans are kind of biding their time, and they're sort of marshaling their forces, and they're placing them in strategic areas. And it has a name. It's because at the time this stretches on for weeks and months, and when you're in the middle of it, you start wondering what's happening. Again, looking back in retrospect, it's just a blip. And we can see why it happened in retrospect. But at the time, there were a bunch of people who started openly wondering if this wasn't a real war after it had got a name, the phony war, because maybe this is all a bunch of nothing anyway. And when we think about it, about the really difficult times or the hardships of our lives, especially the ones that we can anticipate and we worry about, that those can stop and start. And there is something deeply unsettling about being worried about something happening, knowing that it's happening, but it's not really happening. Like the real active part either pauses or it doesn't occur yet. And you kind of want to, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're okay.
That really was the way World War II was.
Is that right?
So anyway, that's kind of the human historical context, I believe, of what's happening here. And so Wormwood must have given a report that his patient, probably like a lot of the other people who were around him at this time, it refers to a corresponding lull in their anxiety, right? So if it looks like you were gearing up for something terrible, and then what happens seems to kind of fizzle out, well, maybe your state of anxiety and worry begins to subside. Whether or not this is a permanent state of affairs, and we know historically it wasn't. But if you think that, we might be fighting Germans off the shores of Dover any day now, and after 2 months, nothing has happened, maybe you start to think, okay, maybe an equivalent for us, not an equivalent, but maybe something that's kind of similar, watching the track of an oncoming hurricane. And as it gets closer and closer, and they wobble, and sometimes they're headed dead at us, and within hours they shift. And when that's happened, especially a big one, it shifts away from us, don't you kind of, okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't have to be right on top of you, and we get some really nasty effects. So it's, just because it's not right on top of you doesn't necessarily mean you're okay. But that same sense of the anxiety goes up and down. And so he's in his anxiety is starting to slack because of the war is sort of on pause. And Wormwood is reporting this. Possibly, what do I do? Why do you think Wormwood would want to ask Screwtape what to do if the anxiety is lessening?
I didn't hear the question.
Why do you think Wormwood would ask for Screwtape's advice about what to do if his patient's anxiety is lessening?
Because he hadn't died.
He hasn't dealt with it before. That's possible, yeah. And they like anxiety.
Right.
They love us to be anxious. Anxious is, it's funny that anxiety is this enormous outlay of our energy, and not just mechanically, but like our emotional energy, but to almost zero productivity. It's the biological equivalent, or the emotional equivalent of like revving an engine of a parked car, or one that's in neutral. You hear the engine screaming and the RPMs go way up and the engine starts to overheat, but you're not actually going anywhere. So they love that state of affairs. Not only for the fact that it's not just keeping us in turmoil, but remember that as a species, we're not great multitaskers. People tell you, "Oh, I'm multitasking." Broadly speaking, we're pretty bad at it. And if you're managing to juggle a few things at the same time, you're typically not doing any of them to a high degree. So if you are super anxious about something, you are now preoccupied, and you're far less likely to be engaged in other potentially positive things, constructive thoughts, spiritual growth, or discipleship. So it works in all sorts of ways. Keep them anxious, because those jangly nervous feelings lead to all sorts of negative stuff the demons like, but it also just kind of occupies us and can consume us. Anxiety as a psychological phenomenon and medical condition can become so acute as to be fully debilitating. It can be a life-changing experience, whether that's temporary or permanent. But severe anxiety just kind of alters your life. And so anyway, these guys love it. So, oh no, he's less anxious. What do I do? And so Screwtape's advice is basically kind of be cool, because your patient, his anxiety is dipping a little bit because the activity of the surrounding war is dipping a little bit. But we don't really care about such things. That's going to happen. These little human wars are always kind of hot and cold and up and down. But he does say, and this is where we got to that great quote, that there's a couple of things that you can do: tortured fear and stupid confidence. So if tortured fear is closer to those feelings of anxiety, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, what is stupid confidence, and why would the demons like it?
Well, once you feel confident about it, you move on to other things and then set that aside.
Okay.
So if you were worried about the stuff that the demons want you to worry about,
Sure.
and you've given that up, and
believing that whatever your plan or your whatever is going to work, and getting over.
Okay. Overconfidence. We tend to take that word and immediately associate it with bad outcomes. When we call somebody overconfident, we sort of assume they are set up for failure. Confidence seems to be positive, but there is diminishing marginal returns on confidence. You can be too confident. What happens when you are overconfident?
You make mistakes.
You make mistakes. When you make assumptions that you can do no wrong, you're less careful, you're less aware, you're less thoughtful. This is very much kind of a tortoise and the hare sort of thing, where Slow and steady shouldn't win the race. The hare is really objectively faster than the tortoise, but he's so confident in his speed, he lays down and takes a nap.
Yeah.
That's where the loss comes from, not because of the speed, but because of the overconfidence that comes from the speed.
It's just to say, the overconfidence, you usually end up with a very red face.
So a stupid confidence or an overconfidence, and he's happy to call it stupid because why wouldn't he throw in an insult when he can? Because he hates us. Please remember this. These demons hate us. They are not indifferent to us. They enjoy our misery and misfortune. So a stupid confidence it implies both overconfidence, and I would also say maybe baseless confidence. Anyone ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So that was a study that had come out, it's been some time now, but it gained some popularity just a few years ago, and sort of a popular expression. And it's named after these two psychological researchers, social scientists, Dunning and Kruger. And the nutshell argument is basically the more ignorant you are, the more confident you are of your position. Why do people who know so little feel so strongly about what they know? And it's referred to as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Basically, dumb people think they're smart, while smart people, truly smart people, have kind of a caution about them because they know it's a complicated subject. When you don't realize the subject is complicated, you can just kind of take, it must be X. Well, duh, because you don't know any better, but then you feel very, well, obviously I can see X is right there. It's got to be X. So when he says a stupid confidence, I want to also suggest there is maybe an element of overconfidence that the hare is fast, but not fast enough to keep sleeping. There's the overconfidence. But it also could be, just an ignorant stupidity. Like you're confident for no good reason. The snail being confident that the snail can beat the tortoise is sort of dumb. Hey, snail, you're slow too. But the snail doesn't think he's slow, maybe. Maybe I'm the fastest snail in my family. I don't know. But so I want to suggest the ignorant part of it too, because being confident about something there's no reason for us to be confident. We can still do that. And that can get us into all sorts of trouble. It can, both of those conditions can happen in a variety of ways, but the end result can look exactly the same. If you cross the road with the confidence that no car can hit me because I am too fast, or you cross the road ignorantly because you're just not paying attention, both of them can result in getting hit by a car and being killed. And both those situations could be avoided with just a little bit of care and a little bit of awareness, maybe a little self-awareness.
But I don't need no stinking awareness.
There's a special kind of confidence that happens in certain crosswalks where people are like, I got the right of way.
Yeah.
And there they go. It's real bad. Like in a place like Gainesville, it's filled with so many college students. It's super notorious where pedestrians, they do have the right of way everywhere, but they have a boldness about them that I'm like, even if the other person's in the wrong, you're the one who gets dead. So this is this stupid confidence is going to cause us problems, he says, in kind of a real interesting way. So let's move through what it is. He says that humans live in time, but our enemy destines them to eternity. He therefore, I believe, wants them to attend chiefly to two things, to eternity itself and to that point of time, which they call the present. For the present is the point at which time touches eternity.
Yeah, that was an interesting statement.
It's beautifully put, beautifully put. We have expressed this in other classes and other books and in other ways. But of the human concepts of time, past, present, and future, future is the least real of all three. The past happened, our memory of it, our experience of it is limited, is sometimes inaccurate. The present we are experiencing right now, but the future is our imagination. What we consider the future, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying our perception of it is limited and is connected really to our imaginations, which can be, I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm not saying it can't even have some degree of reliability. That's the concept of the educated guess. We sort of rely on that all the time. You know, we're not, you know, a leaf being blown by the wind to and fro. We do have to proceed as though we have some understanding of what's coming next. You know, that's why they say dogs are so excited when they see you coming home at the end of the day, because to them, they don't understand the passage of time. Like, oh, they're gone and they're going to be back in an hour. And she's like, oh my gosh, he ceased to exist. Oh, he's back again. You know, like we know better. We understand. But whenever it is we start trying to feel something solid in the future, we need to understand that what we're feeling is our own imaginations, which may or may not have any bearing on what really happens. Sometimes it's closer than others, but it never actually exists except within our own imaginations. So to think about the present is where our lives touch eternity. That's because that's what we're granted. We are granted the moment, the now, the is. But that is happening within the scope of eternity, always. This is a point on a line. This is a point on a plane. This is a point on a solid construction. A point is a single moment, like you take a line and it just stretches infinitely. In mathematics, it stretches infinitely in either direction, but it's made up of a series of points, an infinite number of points, but you can break that line up into a dot, into a point, just like you're graphing with an equation. Now, what happened to that point? Well, now that's 2 dimensions. Well, now we take it in a 3rd dimension. And now it's in a plane, like in a rectangle or a square. And then we take it even further. Now we make a solid construction, not just an x-axis and a y-axis, but a z-axis. And now it's points all, the infinite number all over. You know, to go back to a phrase that I've used many times because I do think it's good. This is from a seminary professor, and I thought this is one of the few pretty cool things that he said. He said he never liked the expression that God is timeless. He preferred to say God is timeful, because God is greater than time. As a matter of fact, all time, past, present, and future, is contained within God himself. When you say that God is timeless, number one, it implies that God lacks something, which is not true philosophically or theologically. But it also makes it sound like God stands outside of time and is looking at it. Well, God can see the past, present, and future. Sure, I agree with that, but not because he's standing outside of the vantage point, but because everything we understand as time is so small in comparison to the magnitude of God. It's as though it all fits inside of him. In the Venn diagram, time is the circle and God is all the way around it. So time full, eternity is contained within the very presence of God because it's smaller than God. And then we intersect that moment in our present, at least in this mortal life. That's what we get, is the present moment now, for however many we get. But remember, if time is found within God himself, then that now and that moment is intersecting within that larger set that is contained within God. And it also is intersecting within the presence of God too. We are mindful of eternity in the present, perhaps in the best way, and we are mindful of our connection with God in the moment, in the now, rather than what happened in the past or what might occur in the future.
Well, you can't change the past.
You can't. And your
And
future
the
is
unknown.
is unknown, and it's in your, and again, it's in your imagination. We can make all, well, tomorrow I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to turn out great.
Yeah.
Mañana, that's when I'm going to do my Bible study. Mañana, that's when I'm going to spend time in prayer. Mañana, that is when I am going to act in a loving fashion towards my neighbor as Jesus loves me. Mañana, mañana, mañana. Except, why aren't we doing these things now? Our best laid plans are still that. They're just plans until they are enacted. And whenever you enact something, you are doing it in that present.
That's right. And once you've done it, that's the bad.
Go ahead.
So it is kind of an interesting point. It's one that, our finite minds, we have to kind of hold very carefully to, because a little bit, holding on too tightly to this one and our brains might explode. So there is something very significant about the moment that we're given. And yet, remember that these demons understand they don't want us thinking about the present too much, because that's when the most good can be done, is in the present, not in our future plans. But remember, they're always trying to take what's concrete and make it abstract, and what's abstract and make it feel concrete. And I would say, if you have somebody who's thinking they're very mindful about the present, that's dangerous to the demons. So what do? They can take something concrete like the present and try to make it feel very, very abstract. Carpe diem, seize the day. That is frankly a huge abstraction. What does it mean to seize the day? How do you seize it? Have you seized it enough? Have you seized it at a 63% threshold? It becomes, it becomes something that you can focus on. I'm going to seize the day because this is all I'm granted. And you can actually you can lose the forest for the trees, get kind of absorbed in the I am seizing the day and not actually do anything. We love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength in the here and in the now, not so much in the plans for later. And you can make your plans, but until they're enacted. So again, when we start thinking big thoughts, we are on godly ground. The demons hate that. That's the enemy's territory. So they need to get us, first of all, not on godly ground. They can at all help it. And if they can't, then try to diminish it, obscure it, or abstract it as quickly and as much as possible. He gives a few examples. Because the present is so dangerous, he says, for some people, we tempt them to live in the past. And he gives a couple of examples: a widow or a scholar. How could those people live in the past in a way that is not conducive to their spiritual health or life.
Well, there's nothing they can do about it.
Okay, nothing they can do about it because it's already done.
Yeah,
Or that's all you think of.
Or that's all you-
The widow thinking of the husband,
Sure.
wife, who's no longer there.
Right?
Living in the past of either good or bad, whatever it be. that
That's right.
consumes them. They just are totally forgetting. Right now.
Right. You can take, even if your memory is relatively accurate, which is hard to know. Our memories aren't ever as good as we think they are. And also remember, we are not experiencing that full moment of the past. We're catching a glimpse, a slice, even if it's an accurate slice.
Just our
Um,
view.
And it's our own view of it. It's not actually with other people interacting and what they saw and what they remember or any of that kind of stuff. But if we can be tempted to live in the past, we become a very little good right now. You know, is there anything wrong with learning about history or reading old books? Or, I would say absolutely not. That's great. It can be extremely valuable and important. But if you are consumed with something that is already done, to the point where you have no room for what's happening now, that is a place that the demons are always nudging us to be. We are just as capable of being consumed by thoughts about what might be, worry or hope, or just confusion. The more clear a picture of the future becomes to us, probably the easier, I think, to become kind of lost in it or consumed by it. I think that makes sense to me. That, remember, the future is imaginative to a large degree. So the only way to make that, to kind of fine tune the picture, make it more clear, is to think more about it. And the more we think about it, the more we become, the deeper down a hole we get within our own imaginations and confusing imagination with reality. You know, if I won the lottery tomorrow, ooh, that sounds exciting. Boy, that sure would be nice to not have to worry about X, Y, Z. And then you start thinking about, well, you know, this is the car I would buy, and I would probably buy it from this dealership and not that dealership. And you know what color I'd really like? I'd really like that color, but this option. You start, you know, going further and further and further down a hole to something that doesn't actually exist. And now you spend all this time, you've spent maybe this emotional capital on things that aren't actually real. But because you have made it more and more clear by thinking about it more and more, it becomes more and more enticing to think more and more about it.
And it's not really helping anybody, you or anyone around.
To be perfectly frank, imagining what you're going to do winning the lottery does you no good today. You get nothing else done.
Right. How about the lottery of your health? So I think I have not experienced like a real health crisis, but I'm thinking of my sister who does. For people who have like really, you know, stuff that you want to be healed of, and that's a good desire. But there are people who are, you know, in the just using the word, but some will be like, name it and claim it, it's mine.
Yeah.
They'll use the Isaiah 53 verse. By a stripe you are healed. But and whatever the outcome is, I mean, I'm not going down that road, but I'm trying to imagine, maybe y'all are into something, but I think of my sister or other people who passed, who probably wanted something like that, and I'm gonna say imagine or pray or whatever, we add whatever we want to that, but I'm trying to think a lot of our fellow brothers and sisters are either praying for people. Or they're actually living that experience of wanting that future outcome.
Yes.
And
Well-
and in reality, it's like the lottery, it doesn't happen.
As we get a little further down this paragraph, it actually speaks to that fairly directly.
What chapter?
To be sure, the enemy wants men to think of the future too, just so much as it is necessary for now, planning the acts of justice or charity, which will probably be their duty tomorrow. The duty of planning the morrow's work is today's duty, though its material is borrowed from the future. The duty is like all duties, is in the present. This is not straw splitting. He does not want men to give the future their hearts, to place their treasure in it. We do. His ideal is a man who, having worked all day for the good of posterity, if that is his vocation, washes his mind of the whole subject, commits the issue to heaven, and returns at once to the patience or gratitude demanded by the moment passing over him. To lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven is in heaven, not our imagined future. Our hearts will break if they are placed within our imagined future. Can't hold it. It cannot withstand that kind of pressure. Our hearts belong to the Lord, and where is he present with us? But right now. And so, but if we give our hearts away to something that doesn't even exist, we are setting ourselves up, not just for failure, but potential destruction.
That loss of hope that we were,
Oh, sure.
then you go through that cycle again.
And that can be debilitating when you've placed all your hope in some sort of future occurrence. This has to happen or else. Well, when the or else happens, you are undone.
Sure.
Maybe it causes you to deny your faith as a whole, or maybe it just puts you in such a dark place because of it. You become despondent, and then all other things can happen, or you do. So our hearts were not built for the future. Our hearts were built for eternity, and these aren't the same thing. And it is a tricky little distinction to make, and yet I think it is of enormous significance. Screwtape certainly seems to think so. But even living in the present for our own good, where is fun? Where is joy? Where is love? Where is peace, if not in the present? If you're only remembering the memory of sensations in the past, or you are waiting for that time when they might occur again, you're not actually able to receive what's being offered in the here and in the now. I spent many years of my life when I was much younger, treating what I was doing and where I was as something of a way station, a bus station in life. You know, where I am right now is not where I intend to be, so I'm not going to put my heart in it. I'm just biding my time until I can get to real life, which is that other thing up there. Except, of course, real life is only where you are right now. That's what's real.
Don't you think that a lot, that is difficult of a lot of people who are, say, students or that kind of stuff?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, any basically ordained temporary condition, you can kind of not really take seriously. You don't bloom where you're planted if you know you're about to be transplanted within X number of times, except what we're given is the now. The real life is the sum total of all the nows that we are experiencing, not just the ones that we're waiting for or have circled. It's all of them. even the ones that we think or assume are unimportant.
So COVID was kind of a bust of sorts
Sure.
that nobody liked.
No, but it was still real. That was
Correct.
real life.
Right. Where are they going there? What you said. So it's sort of like these people go, well, I don't like where I'm at right now. Like I'm in school or, you know, I'm really looking for this. or
Yeah,
whatever.
sure.
But this was like, nobody was even thinking this kind of interruption was gonna happen.
Yeah.
And we were all belly aching over it, and a lot of people had real heartache with the corpse. You know, we talked about it, we talked about it on Sundays a lot.
Yeah.
And
You know, that's not to say that real life is always pleasant, because sometimes it is suffering and loss. And yet we miss what is good, even within the suffering and the loss, if we try to avoid that suffering and loss by placing our imaginative selves somewhere else.
Mm.
You know, it is, I'm not saying the here and now is always great, because it's not.
no, a lot of it isn't.
But once again, the here and the now, that is what's real. And it's where God has promised to be. When he says, I am has sent you, and I've preached about this, that the grammatical construction is unclear, and it contains both the I was past and I shall be future, but it ain't for nothing, I think, that it's still expressed in the present. I am. Right now. 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 And that's where God is with us, always now. Good and bad. All right, next one, chapter 16. Church. This is a bit of a shift, but it's kind of a good one for us, I think. Wormwood has been unsuccessful getting him to stop going to church. This guy is still going to church. That's bad for the demons.
And only one church.
Whoa, that's real bad for the demons. What's so bad about sticking to one church?
You might learn something.
You just might. And they obviously don't want us learning anything. Our ignorance is their bliss. So us actually learning things is bad news for them. But there's a whole host of things that are connected when we stick
He
with the one
talks about
church.
parochial versus congregation.
Yes.
And I had never thought about it. Parochial being a variety of peoples.
That's right. A variety of people located within an area. You just have kind of a, so this is within my philosophical model of our congregation. The English parish model, the parochial model, is basically the parish is a geographical area, and the parish church was located in the center of that geographical area. It was intended then to be the spiritual center for everyone who lived in that area. They had a stake in it, and the church had a stake in you, whether you showed up on a Sunday or not. And that's how I have always wanted us to operate. And I believe to a great degree, that is how we do operate. That's why we're always, opening up our facility to organizations and clubs and teams and groups and all this kind of stuff, because we have a stake in our wider community and we want them to have a stake in us. And we are your spiritual resource, whether we see you on a Sunday or not. That's why we'll do burials for people we've never met. And then host a reception for them. And maybe we never see them again, but it's still the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned. That is a parochial mindset and model that says, in that same kind of bloom where you're planted idea, within our surrounding neighborhoods, please consider us your parish church. Yeah, but I go to that one across the street. Okay, God bless you. But if you need us, we're always here. But I'm not going to come there on a Sunday. Okay, but if you need us, we're always here. You need a place to meet. You need somebody to talk to. The other place is closed for a weekend and you come here, whatever it is. We will serve you as those serving Christ, regardless of who you are. And even if we don't really get much of a return on it at all. That's more of a parochial model. But congregational model is a little more affinity based,
Kind of a club.
a club. I go to this church because I like it. It is filled with like-minded people. It is filled with the music I enjoy. It is the aesthetics that speak to me. It is in an area that I feel most comfortable. It is in a language that I like, whatever. We are bound together out of sort of like-minded decisions and choices. And there can be some positive things about that, don't get me wrong. But I think that there's something that the demons are pointing at to say there's the risk.
Yeah.
If you choose to go to this one particular church because of stuff that you like, does that not imply that you may simply choose to go to a different one that you like for a different reason, or that you like for the same reason, but just a little bit more?
That sounds like people are in their relationships, like marriage.
You are the one for me
Yes.
until I see a better deal. Now, in marriages, we see that as a terrible thing. And that, I think we've seen consequence of that. But, I gotta say, if we are as the church, bride of Christ, then perhaps we would be better suited to have a mindset closer to the commitment and the faithfulness, the fidelity of love, rather than the appeal of affection. Remember, biblical love, happy to preach this all the time, faithfulness and commitment. And it's less about emotions and affections. Now, that has nothing to do with emotions and affection, but biblical love is really more about I stand with you no matter what, as opposed to I really like you. Because I got to say, sometimes I like you and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like myself and sometimes I don't. And sometimes it's because I have done something or you have done something. And sometimes it's because I'm hungry or I'm sleepy or the moon is waxing or who the heck knows why. But a church built on a notion of family and committed love sticks together, stays together, stands together differently than one that is, well, I like being here because it appeals to me. Number one, what appeals to you can change. Things that appeal to you now might not have appealed to you 20 years ago. And they might not appeal to you in 3 years. The whole concept of the church of what's happening now, or the cutting edge, you always have to be chasing that. And there are people that I love and respect, but they will not stay in a church long enough for it to remain uncomfortable. When the going gets tough, they get going. And there's a calculus to this that I understand. I'm not denigrating about, oh, you're just such a terrible person. It's basically like, I need, with all the turmoil already in my life, and life is hard and difficult and busy, I want to go to church and get that sense of peace and love and joy because I really need it. Why would I go to some place and get more difficulty? I get it. I understand that. But I have to say that same attitude, which makes some intuitive sense, I think teaches us and we practice staying on the surface and just bouncing from the coast is clear to the coast is clear. We don't really get to know people. They don't really get to know us. We don't really get the benefit of what you receive in getting through the hard times, because those hard times don't seem worth it, so you go someplace else. But sometimes it's what you get after the hard times that not only makes the hard times worth it, it was better than it was before.
Marriage. So often it's just like, no, I'm not here, divorce.
So
Right.
This, and that's not to say, you can never go anywhere else, or you always have to go, but there's some things that, Roman Catholics are encouraged to go to their parish church and not to find a, like, you definitely just go to Roman Catholic Church, but we don't even really want you going to the one across town because you like the preacher or pastor better. Why? Well, because you are there for Christ and his sacraments. You are not there for how good the sermon was. That's what's being communicated. And while I think there are problems with that, I think there's also a great deal of good to that. And it's one of the reasons why this is, even though it doesn't always work that way, Methodism is built in a similar manner. They move you every 3 or 4 years because they want you going to church not out of a personality, but out of a place and a commitment and a relationship out of Christ himself. I am not a boring preacher, personally. You can like my style, dislike my style, think I'm a dummy or think I'm brilliant, but I don't think I'm boring. So there's some boring people out there. Like it's monotone, or it drones, or it just kind of meanders around and you never really understand the point. I would get very frustrated by that. But that's kind of a personal failing, right? Like my lack of patience is a little bit of a personal failing. The flip side of that is I don't think we should encourage our preachers to be boring and meandering. I think everybody always ought to bring bring your best every time. But when they know that people aren't there for me and I'm going to get moved, and we are really underselling the importance of, say, a sermon, it can engender people just kind of going through the motions, which I don't want to have happen. But at the same time, if you overemphasize it, then it kind of brings about like the cult of personality, or pastors as game show hosts, who the more entertaining they are, then the quote unquote better they are. And so there's real risks in both sides. I just think we have lost something in our choice that is actually kind of important, if not significant.
So you talk to family at the church a lot of individual households have broken up, and that sends people to different places too.
Sure.
You have any comment on how that makes it difficult for you personally, or people like to get in those positions, or the churches itself, to remain as a family when families in the family are breaking up?
It can be very difficult. I'll just say you never know.
Yeah.
It took me at least a year before I could parse out all the goers.
Yeah.
Well, we're still doing it.
And wait, what? Penny and Bruce were married? You're just pulling my leg now. No. And Patsy, like, that's their daughter, but she's married to Jim. Well, yeah, and he's married to Morgan. And they're all sitting together. Why is this so weird? So you never know.
Why did they renew their vows together?
You never know how some of this might actually play out. It is when we are encouraged to look deeper on a consistent basis than our feelings and our tastes. And that this whole chapter is predicated on, if you can't stop him from going to church, try to get him to become a connoisseur of churches.
Right.
Thought that was an interesting phrase.
It's a great phrase because I know people who do this. We don't really use a phrase like that very often, but I've definitely heard people called church hoppers or church shoppers. We definitely have a consumer mindset within contemporary American church-going culture that says we have to entice you, attract you, market to you, advertise to you. And then when you're here, we want to hook you because if we don't, or if we don't keep it up, someone else will. We are in competition between these other churches for your spiritual consumer dollars or whatever it is. And if the other church is a little sharper or a little fancier or more aggressive or whatever it is, you know, then we might lose out. So we better, the problem is not only churches then lose sight of their own focus. Their focus is not on Christ crucified. Their focus is on their temporal numerical success. And you're willing to do whatever it is that you need to do, you think, in order to get those numbers right. But then it not only hurts the church, it hurts the people who are going there because they're not given what they ought to be given. They are enticed, they are attracted. They are marketed to, and when you are a consumer, when you are a connoisseur, you stand apart, away, and maybe even above what it is you are consuming or what you are a connoisseur of. For I now am the judge, and we shall see if you are up to my standard.
That's,
Yeah.
Screwtape.
So
Screwtape.
So it's Jesus Revolution movie. Shed their coats and ties.
Yeah.
You know, they're wearing sneakers because the consumer wanted that. You know, a lot of those young consumers, that's what they wanted, and so they gave what they wanted. And you know, and it went in the direction.
Well, I haven't,
Some of that is.
I haven't seen the movie.
Attempt to be marketed.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but again, that pendulum can swing in, you know, both ways in the sense of, you know, the formality of dress wear then becomes a defining factor and it becomes a barrier for some people, a turnoff for some people. It becomes an impossibility for some people. For some people, it becomes a rationale. Now it's more important about how I look, looking right, looking sharp, looking good, than it is why I'm actually at church in the first place.
Well, again,
It becomes very strange.
the marketing you were saying. Now, it wasn't intended to cause happening. But you know, a lot of Florida is like flip flop.
Yeah.
Shorts, and I love that too. But to make it easy or seeker sensitive or something.
I am
That you're kind of comfortable.
I am the most casually dressed Episcopal priest I have ever met
Yes.
in my life. And it's not that I haven't seen other priests who dress casually, but nobody does it to the frequency that I do.
But in that garb, hard working.
Well, you know, it's something that I hope is a matter of indifference. And this is, we get to that, we get to that at the end of this chapter. This is St. Paul writing about, well, what's the word? What's the Greek word? Come on, David. The word, no. The word that's popping in my head is anathema, but that's the exact opposite of what I mean. Adiaphora, a matter of indifference. Basically letting the important things be important and the secondary things not be a reason to break faith or relationship.
It don't need meat if it really harms that other person.
This is some days are counted special by some and are not by others. Some people abstain from meat and some people eat meat. He calls it a matter of adiaphora, that these are secondary issues that even if they have a meaning to the person, which is real, we ought to be humble enough and faithful enough to serve our brother and sister by setting those personal preferences aside. This is why the one who refrains from meat should be willing to eat meat if it's going to cause the other, the younger, less mature Christian harm, and vice versa. He gets into this thing about how he loves, and he's talking most about the Church of England because that's what he knows best. the Church of England is constantly, kneecapping itself with all of its little parties and policies to distinguish one congregation from the next. We are higher church, we are lower church. We say this, we do this, we use incense, we never do. And those ought to be matters of eternal indifference. I love the liturgical calendar, and I mean that not just in a sense of I have a personal affinity and I think it's cool, but I see great value within my own life and within the lives of others. But if it came down to it and it's a stumbling block for somebody else, I would never insist on that person following the liturgical calendar.
I've heard Baptist preachers on the radio put it down, just a waste of time.
And this is the matter of indifference, where what is most important to us, and if it is Christ himself and his Holy Spirit that unifies us, then we do our best to not get hung up on the details. Now, before we say there's no content worth arguing about, that even sneaks in here too, where he basically says, I'm not talking about serious doctrinal issues. He's talking about all the trappings, all the applications of those issues. This is where we become, as pharisaical as any Pharisee on, what does the person preaching at your service, what do they wear? And who cares except the people who do, and it's not so much I care about what they wear as though it's actually expressed a little differently than that, because they're not wearing this other thing. It's not so much that he's wearing the right thing, it's just he's not wearing the wrong thing. Right? So, he better not be wearing a robe. He better not be wearing flip-flops. He better not be, whatever. So I think it's a little easier to say, because it feels petty to say he better do such and such, because it feels very narrow and very selfish. But if you put the reverse on it, I think it doesn't feel quite so bad, because you're saying, oh, I'm fine with a lot of stuff as long as it's not that. but you're really just doing the same thing.
So that I didn't intend to say like I hate the casual Friday look of our Sundays. But so there was a field growing, maybe not growing, that there was something special about going to the house of God.
Yes.
And so you don't, I'm not intending to say this, but you didn't come in flip-flops, that we made a special effort because it was God, not just to be outwardly supposedly,
sure.
but in the end, a lot of it was just outward. I understand that. But that even, this is the thing I miss, in my church, a silence.
Right.
When we're in there, and I can hear the foyer and stuff, and this is just my personal, because I really just or the processional, or
Sure.
But we're so casual now that we're talking like this right before everything gets started.
Well, including you.
Exactly. Well, because I'm just.
I get it. This is a tricky thing where all of those directions are fraught with things that you lose as well as things that you gain.
We got a 1:30.
Right. Bye-bye. So remember, what the demons want us to do is to get hung up on it.
Well, yeah, and now.
And then start making your judgments over and above others, including churches, on things like that. So now you are the standard. And as soon as you are the standard, you are the star. And when you're the star, then that's the terrible thing about being a consumer of churches. Then you are not there for Christ crucified. You are there for you.
So as the charismatic thing made its swing through the Episcopal Church, you're not even born then. You know, I'm like 14 in 1974. And so they weren't doing like charismatic stuff on Sunday morning. You know, that's like the least world, you know, had a special day or whatever. And the services are changing. But there is sort of that creep of where the mass of people, out of 100, 90 want it that way. So, okay, the other 10 can be whatever that was that they like. They can be quiet. Hey, you 10, okay, be quiet. I mean, don't worry about us. You still want to be silent. Don't tell us 90 to be quiet because that's what it used to be, or to dress a certain way.
Right.
I don't care anymore.
It,
But that was consumer driven because the 90 out of 100
sure.
were saying we're showing up like this now, and the other 10 are like, well, I'm going to either keep on, you know, suit and tying it, or I'll put my
And
like they do.
right, and some of it comes down to, you know, what we are willing to compromise or cooperate with, and what are we willing to
Right.
see as adiaphora that it's matter of indifference. And the biggest deal about this again is, if you are the star of the show going to church, you are then sitting over and above who church is supposed to be about, which is not you. It's never about us. You know, it's obviously a complicated matter, and it gets, you know, every direction has its own excesses and own problems, but it's more of a mindset. That doesn't mean there's not reasons to leave a church. That doesn't mean there's not reasons to choose one church over another. It is to say we must be very careful of a mindset that sets ourselves and our tastes and our preferences in the top spot of what church is about, because it ain't about you.
So don't you think at the point of the Reformation where they were not wanting to have a split, right? Am my understanding is right? Nobody wanted the church to.
Yeah, nobody, but sure, yeah. The initial is let's fix this rather than let's break this. Yes.
So I don't know where I was going with that other than it's not like, you know, we want everybody to wear flip-flops back in the 1500s.
Yeah.
But they wanted a certain Reformation theology that had obviously gone wrong. No.
Well, there you go. Done.
I'm saying, at this point, this was real important where the people who did not want to go find another
Sure.
church, in other words, split, they had no choice to go with what we have now, the Protestant and Catholic thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
they made the right decision, in my opinion, because the Catholic would not reform.
and then, yeah, and then within the same generation, they're fighting tooth and nail and sometimes to the death
I know.
about some extremely minor things.
Name one. I mean, I know there was, I'm trying to remember that. Certainly not.
Well, if you were here reading Pilgrim's Progress with us, which is very much a work of the 16th and 17th century,
Right.
he's talking about arguments that people are having. And oh yeah, like baby baptism was a matter. I mean, like we would kill you.
Right.
There's all sorts of stuff that where we're gonna keep splitting.
Yeah.
You know, from well, that's not right.
That's genius taking over. I'm just like these guys right here going, let's make them focus on
Sure.
this.
Yeah, because we no longer have a pope that we are agreeing or disagreeing with. We now have 8 billion popes.
But I don't want one. I don't think we should even have one.
But I'm saying you now have one, and his name is Lee.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm just saying that we have, but I think you are. I think you are your own authority. Yeah. Yeah, you are your own authority is what I'm saying. And that's just basically that's the atmosphere that we breathe in. That is we don't know we're wet because we live underwater. We are all our own authority. And that's just, you know, welcome to the 21st century. Well, for a good long time. For a good long time. Maybe, but certainly since then, yeah. It's been a fundamental shift, and it's just kind of kicked the can and traded one problem for another. Okay, we gotta wrap this up. Anything else? All right, we will catch 17 and 18 next time. Thank you.